One. Okay, so I'm so excited to be here with the tax department at Walsh College. And I have the chair of the tax department, Professor Rick Davidson, and then I have the faculty, Professor Eric Skinner, John Alfonsi, and Professor Dan Hoops. Thank you so much for joining. I want to jump right in and talk about Walsh College specifically for tax education. So Rick, tell us about Walsh, the options students have, and why it's the best program that they can choose.
Great, thank you, Susie. So Walsh has got 4 different distinct kind of avenues for taking tax classes and learning about tax during your experience at Walsh. First, we have the Bachelor of Accounting program, which incorporates 3 distinct tax classes in it. I believe our Bachelor of Accounting program has more tax than any other comparable bachelor's program, business program, in the state among our competitors. Our Masters of Accounting program has 3 tax classes also, individual, corporate, partnership, together. And then we have a class that I don't think anyone else really has, which is a tax compliance class where we teach you the nuts and bolts of doing tax returns. So whether you want to be a tax professional or not, you will get a really good background in the nuts and bolts of tax, even just to help you on a personal level, with your own taxes, with your friends, with your relatives, et cetera. Then we have a Masters of Accounting program, a specialization in tax. So you can take the 3 classes that I've mentioned earlier and also add more classes, more specific tax classes, if you find an area of tax that you're interested in and that perhaps is even a more relevant path for your job.
No, that's great.
We have
what
I would refer to as the gold standard, which is our Master of Science in Taxation program, which is a 30-credit, tax boot camp, for lack of a better term, where we take you from A to Z. We teach you the nuts and bolts of tax from a corporate, partnership, individual, compliance, trust and estates. We cover the waterfront with respect to getting you a really good comprehensive tax education, so that when you finish, you're going to get 2 things. You're going to get your Master of Science in Taxation, and we're going to give you, that's our formal badge, but our informal badge is we're going to call you a tax guy. We're going to call you a tax professional, which I think is really, really important in the market today, to be able to differentiate yourself from those you're competing with for jobs.
No, that's so true. And I love how you talk about it as the gold, I'm looking at my blazer, the gold standard, the MST, right? Because what you're saying is tax touches on every area of business. And it's all we're hearing about in the news, right? Whether it's change in the tax law or different ways businesses have to be strategic. So Eric, talk to us a little bit about how does tax really permeate and cut through every area of business, and why it's so important for people to be trained up in this, and why there's such a need.
Yeah, one of the things I really enjoy about teaching tax is really getting to explain to students how pervasive tax is in all aspects, not only of business, but personal life. I mean, we start with our individual income tax and we go through, hey, what are the big, life choices, life events that happen, whether you get married, you have children, you get a new job, you relocate, you're going to plan for paying for education, plan for retirement. Taxes weaves itself through all of that, all of those decisions. And it really is interesting in the classroom when the lights go on and they really see, hey, yeah, every decision I make, whether I'm going to buy or lease a home, the type of job I have, where I'm going to live, all these major life decisions really weave through tax. And then we move into the business classes, and then it's really driven home. I challenge every one of my students and all the classes, hey, come up with a business idea that doesn't on some level involve tax, whether, starting from a client that wants to begin a business, right? What entity choices do they have? How do they capitalize the business? How do they bring in new partners or new investors or owners? How do they expand the business? They're going to buy and sell. They're going to transfer the business on to the second generation. I mean, all of those classes, all of those issues inherently involve tax. And if you're going to a business school, you're going to learn to talk business. You need to learn to talk tax. I analogize it to trying to talk English without using adjectives and adverbs. It's like, well, maybe you'll get some points across, but you're really not a full business advisor until you can also, recognize and identify those tax aspects that are there. I mean, they might not be apparent, but it's your job as advisor to recognize those and really bring the value home to the client and to the employer to show that, look, really taxes do play a role. They are a cost of business, just like raw materials, labor, electricity, rent, all of those costs, and taxes is just another cost of doing business. And to get a client from point A to point B to help them realize their goals and objectives, there could be a number of different pathways, and tax helps you quantify the cost of those different pathways. And really, once the students start to understand that, then we get into the rules and the code sections. They understand a method to the madness, and they really see the benefit of a tax education.
So Eric, a couple of things I really want to highlight that you said. First, it's like, let's talk tax, because every area touches on it. And how many times in law, so that's my background too, I have a law degree, do clients come and they'll ask you a question on estates or on business, and you say to them, you really need to talk to a tax professional. And so this is why that profession is so valuable in the marketplace, because before you start a business, right, before you do an estate, before you make a plan, you're almost negligent if you don't have that tax background. And those professionals command a very strong salary. Something else you said that's important too, how it really threads through every area. So entrepreneurs and business people and even emerging technology is really going to have to take advantage, because if you're a tax professional, you can actually save your company 3 times as much as your salary and become invaluable. So that's what I want to talk about next, are jobs. And Dan, tell us a little bit about what are the jobs out there for people that have this expertise, and where do you see the marketplace growing in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, and just to kind of carry on what Eric was just talking about, how tax, it permeates everything. 3 of the 4 people on the call were tax lawyers. John Alfonsi's not a lawyer, but John Alfonsi knows about as much, if not more, about tax than the 3 tax lawyers do, right? And part of that's what we do at Walsh, is we're trying to get people that, that really, really strong basic understanding where you can talk as a tax professional to anybody. And what that allows people to do is to get into almost any area of business where there might be a lot of jobs, whether it's working in, a solo practitioner in their firm. They want to have a tax practice. Maybe you want to work at a mid-size or a big 4 accounting firm. Maybe you want to go in-house, you want to go industry. Maybe you want to go work in a tax department at a law firm, for example. There are a lot of CPAs and Walsh alums who'll go work at a law firm, for example, even though they're not, they don't have a law degree. So the number of possible positions that somebody could take with a strong background in tax, it's second to none. And it's, we call it a hard science, which a lot of people think tax is extremely hard, but we try to teach it in such a way that it's really not that hard. It's just a matter of getting your head wrapped around it, and people look up to you, they'll respect you. And especially with the Walsh students and alums, we've got a huge network of people, and they know what you went through when you come through the Walsh tax program, whether it's in the undergraduate classes or all the way up through the MST program. There is a tremendous amount of knowledge that you're going to get, practitioner type knowledge, so that when you go on, into your job or, wherever it may be, you're prepared, and people have a lot of respect for you. So, I mean, the jobs are just, it could be just any type of a job. In fact, we did have an alum who went on to become, I believe, the CFO of the Buffalo Bills, for example. So wow. We've got, an interest, it could be just about anything. So we've got a lot of really interesting history with our programs here in the classes, and so people on this call and other people who've come before us that are trying to keep it that way, and we want it to be that way. We take a lot of pride in it.
Yeah, it's very industry aligned and very relevant. So speaking of alums, we have one with us here with John. John, talk to us a little bit about what were the value adds in the Walsh tax education program that you did, and why are you seeing it applicable in your job? And also, where are you seeing the jobs and maybe the biggest threats and opportunities for tax? So there's a lot in that question. So I'll let you take it away.
Sure. No, it's as an alum of the MST program, it provided me a lot of great skills that I apply throughout what I do today. So I'm a partner in a CPA firm in public accounting, and getting to Rick's and everybody's point, we look at that MST graduate, that degree, as that gold standard. So when we're trying to analyze potential job applicants, if we're looking at somebody that is, I'll call it just a CPA, or a CPA that has an MST degree, we're going to place a higher reliance and, look at that candidate in a lot more positive light than somebody that doesn't have that tax background. So what it taught me, and what I continue to teach my students, is beyond the tax technical knowledge types of things, which is extremely important. And that's one of the reasons why I loved Walsh and why I love teaching here, is I get to teach what I practice and I practice what I teach. That was one thing that when I was in the program, I would hear in particular one night at a lecture, and I'd be able to go into the office the day after and say, we just went through this. This is great. I know how to approach this now, which is the one critical thing I like to teach my students is problem solving. A person that has a tax technical knowledge is a very analytical person. They know how to solve a problem. And I relate this to what I do with my kids as well, which is I don't necessarily need to know the particular topic. It's obviously helpful, or the critical knowledge, but it helps you be able to solve a problem from a critical thinking perspective. A lot of what I do, besides tax compliance, tax planning, is dispute advisory services, whether it be economic damages, business valuations, lost profits, lost wages. Getting to Eric's comment, that tax thread weaves its way through everything and every single transaction that we've done. And what I found is a lot of times in resolving a dispute, it doesn't turn on the valuation side of things. It turns on what a particular tax issue is. So somebody that has that tax knowledge is going to be head and shoulders above everybody else. So it's that critical thinking. It's being able to apply that skill set, being able to know how to read a document. If you can read the Internal Revenue Code and the regulations and interpret that, you're going to be able to read and interpret anything and everything. So from a job perspective, it's not only, as Dan was saying, with respect to public accounting or internal tax department, it's going to be everything that is business related. My business valuation people have tax knowledge and tax degrees. Anybody from an economic damage perspective needs to understand that. You're talking about internal tax people, partners at local big four firms, CFOs. And from a salary perspective, I would almost say the sky's the limit. I mean, you're talking entry level salaries for somebody with a CPA or an MST at roughly around $60,000, to somebody that is a manager, could be $125,000 to $150,000, to partners that will make in excess of $200,000, $250,000, to, as Dan was saying, CFOs of the Buffalo Bills. I don't know what he made, but CFOs, it's not uncommon for somebody to make in excess of $500,000. So really the sky's the limit with respect to that. No, you're not going to make, Michael Jordan, LeBron James type salaries, or, rock star type salaries, but you will make a very good living having that tax critical knowledge that you'll be able to apply in everyday life.
Well, John, and I love what you said too about how if you're hiring and you're seeing resumes come in and you see experience in the accounting world and the tax world, so you see somebody with an MST and a CPA, or with an MST with that accounting piece, you're going to go with the MST because you know that threads through every area, and that really is going to help that person have a more global view and be able to serve more clients, be able to understand different markets and different problems that they need to solve. That's important because many times people might say, well, do I need to niche down this much? Actually, yes, because that's where the value is. That's really where the market needs to go in order for these people to have the credentials they need. So I love that piece of it. I also loved how you said when you're at Walsh, and I want to hear a little more, when you were at Walsh, you actually were learning and then applying it right away in your field. So it wasn't like you were learning something in theory, but you were actually be able to say, oh, we just covered this. I know how to do this, or I know how to deploy that. That's another value add that a Walsh grad has, is that they're actually getting real-time theory application and practice. Would you say that was a valuable part for you?
Oh, absolutely. So again, being able to see in practice what I was learning and what I'm teaching. I get the feedback from the students, which is great. I can take this back to the office and apply it immediately. But I wanted to touch on one thing that you brought up, Susie, which was with respect to, do I need to drill down or niche that much? When you're talking tax, even though that's a very focused type of an area or degree, it does have broader aspects which you can narrow down even further once you do have that general tax background. You can get into state and local taxation. You can specialize in international tax. My practice focuses heavily on partnership and LLC taxation, so vehicles of choice, private equity, venture capital, real estate developers. So even once you have that tax degree or that knowledge, you can even drill that down even further to something more specific. And the one thing that I was going to mention is that I will have either employees or people that have come to me and they'll say, I don't have an advanced degree. I'm not sure if I want to go into tax. What should I otherwise look at? Should I go get an MBA or maybe a master's in finance? Regardless of whether, I'd love for them to end up at Walsh because we are the gold standard, but it's that tax degree that touching on what every one of us has talked about, is that's the one area. One, it's not going to go away. We're always going to have taxes in our lives. So understanding those and being able to interpret those is going to be critical. And two, it gets back to my other point, it's going to teach you to be a critical thinker. And those two skills, whether or not you choose to practice tax, are going to permeate throughout your career in whatever it is that you choose to do. You're not going to get that with any other degree.
We have
Susie,
such a great example as an alum, John. And I mean, literally quick, look at his office. You could just tell that this is someone, he's got the binders back there and it's just great. Rick, go ahead. Share with us a little bit about how you see this factoring into really just the overall educational scene at Walsh, but specifically.
Well, I wanted to just touch on one thing that you said that was really important. When on the practical side of it, which is kind of what John focused on and what you've touched on also. When you go, I tell my Bachelor of Accounting students who I see, as they're still forming their plan for their education. When you go to Indeed.com or you open up a want ad or do an internet search or LinkedIn, when you have a tax degree, you can type in tax manager, tax accountant, tax director, tax planner. If you're a CPA, which is certainly a wonderful, aspirational goal, you're typing in accountant, you're typing in auditor. If a CPA has an MST, they're now taking their job search and they're doubling and tripling it because all those keywords that perhaps they would not think of in a job search now apply. As Eric always talks about when I teach with Eric, is you have another tool in your toolbox, right, Eric? You have another skill to sell. I'm not just an internal auditor. I'm not just someone who's focused on specifically auditing financial statements. I actually have another tool, another skill, another selling point as we're all selling ourselves throughout our whole career.
Right. I mean, it gives you another lens to look at the transaction with. It gives you another skill set, to bring to the table. And as John said, this critical thinking, you just can't get enough of that. Bring that to bear on any transaction, any deal your client's working on, and being able to work through it. I tell you, if you can work through a transaction from a tax perspective, you will not know that transaction any better. You'll better than anybody else on the table, anybody else in the room, in terms of what's going on, what the metrics are, what the key points are, and really how to get into the transaction and work it so that your client's goals and objectives are met.
Yeah, that's so great. I'm going to ask a difficult question, or maybe not a difficult question, but a fun question. So is this program a good match for, let's say, attorneys that are out there that are in business or corporate and recognize that, instead of getting an LLM in tax, I'd like to get a master's so that I can really up level, or would they have to do other training? Where do you see that fitting with business lawyers that see a gap in their knowledge? Dan.
Can I take this one? because I have an LLM in estate planning, and I have taken classes in Master of Law programs in tax as well. And I know a lot of LLMs in tax. And the one thing that I tell lawyers is that when you go into an LLM program, everybody sitting around you in that room is your competitor. If you come and you take a class in a business school, like an MST program, everybody in that room is going to be a referral source. And so from just a pure business standpoint, you are so much farther ahead of the game if you're sitting around with people who are working like a John Alfonsi. You know, you might have some young person from his firm. You're the only lawyer that student is going to know. Of course, they're going to call you up. And so every single class you take, every professor you meet is a potential referral source for you. That's just on that's the business side. From the learning side, we teach so much more of what they need to know in practice to make them real practitioners. Alfonsi and Skinner mentioned the critical thinking. You don't get that kind of critical thinking in a Master of Law program like you get here, because we're really pushing you into the various assignments and things that you're going to get. It's a unique program. I mean, it was designed by people with Masters of Law and Tax, LLMs, but it's designed for, you know, accountants and non-legal practitioners. But I tell every single lawyer I ever meet, hey, if you're thinking about getting an LLM in tax, you're crazy. Come get an MST. You're so much farther ahead of the game. You'll even learn how to prepare a tax return, which you don't learn in an LLM program. So
Oh, I love that. Go ahead, Rick.
I was just going to mention something, Dan, real quick. I mean, that's very, very important in that what I tell my students is the difference between a tax accountant and a tax lawyer is not only do we need to know the law, we got to make the numbers work as well. So a lot of times I'll work with attorneys that don't understand numbers. They're great at drafting language. And then they'll say, here, take a look at it. And then once you start giving them examples with numbers, they're like, no, that's not what we intended. So being able to understand, making the numbers work with the law is a huge difference.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
practical versus theoretical. I mean, I love LLMs in tax, but I mean, if that's what I want to do to teach, that's one thing. But to really use it, this program just, it's night and day compared to any LLM program. I'm sorry, and I hold an LLM. So
Susie, can I just impose on John to kind of close the loop on a few things that have been touched on? And I'll let John tell the story, but John, you have a recent hire that actually you taught, saw value, and brought into your firm as an important contributor.
Absolutely. So, you know, one of the benefits of being an instructor here at Walsh is I get to first glance and first shot at good tax talent when I see it. But it's that ability to spot people that, yes, are, you know, not just the great tax technicians but are people that are good and quality people with respect to a keen business sense. And that's what I think the program instills, and we're able to give people. And one of the benefits is because you're being taught by the people that are practicing in those areas, you have that potential of being recruited by them and bringing into an office. Catherine has been a great addition to our tax staff and is helping me out on my dispute advisory practice as well. Because again, it's that tax thread that's weaved its way through everything.
Yeah, and there's no question the employability, the career opportunities, and just the knowledge pays for itself. And I love Dan's point about it'll pay for itself in spades if lawyers come through it, because you'll immediately have a network and a client base for when you're finished. So, you know, that's just great. I have enjoyed talking with all of you. It's clear you have such a passion for tax, for your students, for the area. And it's just a real benefit to Walsh. I mean, it is the gold standard, the MST program. And so Walsh is so proud of that program. We're so proud of all of you. And that's just been one of our strengths through years. We've been doing it for years. And that's another important thing you have to think about in business, right? Experience. I mean, there's no substitute, you know, to stay current and relevant and always training up, that's good. But to have a history and experience and alums in the field, that is so valuable. So any last parting thoughts before we wrap up for those listening and getting excited?
One more important thing to touch on, which is we've talked about the quality of the education, but I think just want to kind of close that circle with the quality of the relationships with the students, because we have relatively small classes, because we have relatively small number of instructors. we're able to get to know the student. We're not just their teacher. I think we're their counselor, their advisor, their consoler, their manager, their friend, and in John's case, now their employer. I think it's just, it's not, perhaps not equally as important as the tax technical education that my colleagues have talked about. But to me, the personal attention, the ability to pick up the phone, to text, to Zoom, to have weekly interaction and more if you want it, is really what sets us apart from our competitors who certainly, attempt and I'm sure provide a good education. We make it personal. And we do everything that we can to tailor the education and the experience to that particular student and help them succeed.
Can I say one last thing? And I'm sorry.
Sure.
That's so important that you just said that too, John or Rick, because like in business right now, the hot thing is critical thinking. We've touched on the critical thinking. You don't pay tuition dollars to get more or less critical thinking. The soft skills and those relationships and the networking opportunities that you get, whether it's with your classmates or with your faculty members, that's another thing that we do. We spend a heck of a lot of time with our students, getting to know them. After the fact, they all want to request to become your LinkedIn friend, where they're colleagues sometimes. That's something that's priceless. I don't have a single relationship like that with any other teacher I've ever had, nor from any other institution where I've taught. And I've taught at a few places. I'm kind of old, so I've taught at a few places. I don't have those kind of relationships with the students, but I think everybody on this call has got those kinds of relationships with students going back sometimes, a decade or more. And that's a really good point you brought up, Rick.
Yeah, it's a strong value add for the program, and it really makes you see what the value and the return. It's a no-brainer on investment, but it's a lifetime return, right? I mean, this is an investment of time and money in the program, which pays dividends for life and just, grows your network. So thank you so much for joining today and for talking about tax, talking about it and really learning more. And it's just been a great experience for me to hear from all of you and your passion. So we'll put a link in the video. So if students want to get started and lawyers are listening and thinking this is exactly what I need to really up-level my practice and career, they can get going right away. But thank you so very much.